No one was putting into Google, pawn my piece of a fine art. There wasn't a market in the UK for second-hand luxury leather goods, really. We made that market. The biggest moment for us is the Channel 4 thing. Cut a long story short, 2 weeks later we got a phone call. They love it, they're all over it. They want to make a 1 hour show. I mean, I was nervous as hell. But they said to me, James, you do realise when this goes out, your life will never be the same. I was thinking, what are they talking about? Never be the same. It's a 1 hour TV show. They put this out there. The more they were aired, the more phone calls we were getting, the more juicy material that we would have to film. We got a lot of stick for that, to be quite honest with you, from other pawnbrokers who didn't want it to be aired. But the funny thing is, when that show was aired, their phones rang off the wall as well. So I was getting phone calls from them saying this is the best thing that's ever happened to the industry.
James Constantinou, the founder of a company called Prestige Pawnbrokers. You may remember him because he's on a very famous documentary called Posh Pawn. He lends money against assets such as art, watches, high-end sports cars, but he's also been lending money against some quite bizarre assets such as moonrock, live racehorses, even lending money against a slice of cake from Princess Diana's wedding. He was a door-to-door salesperson, leaving school at 15 years of age. Then he went into selling high-end luxury real estate, and now he's got many sites around the country lending money against your assets. I think you're going to find this quite educational, quite interesting, and he was a great guest. Be happy and never content.
Right, welcome back to my podcast. I think this is going to be a really special episode. I'll tell you why. The birth of my podcast, almost 4 years ago, came from a place of frustration. I'll tell you why. I'm 36 years of age. I was a total flop at school. I really was. I had no direction. There was no such thing as podcast, YouTube interviews back then. Had there been, I believe it would have given me some scope to follow a path. Now, thankfully, the birth of social media, podcasts, YouTube, and other platforms are there. And what I'm trying to do today, which hopefully I'm making an impact on people's lives, is interviewing go-getters, entrepreneurs, athletes, people in music, so I can inspire the younger generation to think, you know what, that person has said something and I really feel I could follow their journey or take parts of their journey. And when I first started, I liked to listen to, get educated by entrepreneurs, and the person in front of me I would call an entrepreneur, someone that is a go-getter, someone that's got a really good story, someone that's been on TV countless times, known for Posh Pawn. He founded a brand, I think in 2008, am I right, James?
Yeah,
called
that's right, mate,
Prestige Pawnbrokers. So James Constantinou.
Constantinou, yeah, that's not bad. Well done.
Thank you for agreeing to come into the podcast. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, mate.
No problem. Good. Be glad to take you whatever you want to talk about. Let's go.
Cool. So, I gave you a little rendition of what I do, my little pitch. I like to take the opportunity. Look, first and foremost, before your TV days and before your pawnbroking days, and let's say all the glamour and everything else, stripping all the way back, what I've read about you is you are a thoroughbred, take this the right way, salesperson. Because I think when I look at this establishment, no matter whether you're selling watches, cars, art, no matter what, you have to sell your product in the right way to give value to your audience, okay? And I class myself as a salesperson. So when I look at people that are more successful than me, I want to learn from them, their sales techniques and stuff, okay? So I take it upon myself that as a salesperson, always try and sell when you can in the right way. I gave you a presentation about Woodbury House, my background in the Richard Hamilton market. I know you're not per se an art expert, but what do you think about the establishment? What do you think about Richard Hamilton as the godfather of street art?
Well, I think it's a great environment here you've got set up, and some of the art is very striking, and we can see some of the images that are sort of iconic, if you like. But it seems great. So, and it's in the heart of Soho. It's just seems fantastic. I'm sure you do well from it. How long have you been here?
We've been here now for about 5 years. We're in a crossroads situation because we've basically outgrown this space due to the work of art that we've got, and also mentally. I feel like we've been here for some time. We've had a lot of success. But now it's about stepping up and going to a new establishment. And funny enough, without giving away too much, Banksy's former gallery, and I'm not going to mention where it is not too far from here. And it looks like we might be able to get in there. And it's very fitting for Richard Hamilton, because Banks is on record in the Shadow Man documentary saying that he got his inspiration from Richard Hamilton, because he's known as a godfather of street art.
Well, if you can get that venue, what a coup for you guys. That'd be great, wouldn't it?
Definitely. So I read 15 years of age, you left school.
Yeah.
I had Charlie Mullins in here, who Pimlico Plumbers sold out last year for reporting almost £150 million. And I love his energy. And I asked him the same question about school, and he said he had a big regret leaving school at 16. I said, oh, why is that? He said, I wish I would have left earlier. And it's quite comical, because there is almost that same kind of, I know, that same kind of drive that entrepreneurs have, that they're not always perfect, but they know what they want out of life, which is more. And it's not a textbook lifestyle. They just go out there and make something happen. So with you, did you always believe that you were going to become an entrepreneur? Did you always believe that you were going to make a success of your life?
Well, it's really weird, because I grew up in the East End, and I moved out to Surrey when I was a young boy. But I always had that sort of East End roots. It's in my blood, to be quite honest with you. My family was sort of go-getters and duckers and divers, if you like. And from a really early age, probably about 10 or 12, I always had problems with sort of conforming, with taking direction, even from teachers or pretty much anyone, even my parents, to be quite honest with you. And it caused a lot of problems growing up. There were issues. I was always being sent home. I was on detention. I was excluded from school quite often. I think I held the school records in my comprehensive for being expelled so many times. That's how bad it got. And I did leave early as well without any qualifications. But I did know from a really early age that an O level or an A level wasn't really going to get me anywhere in terms of my own personal achievements. I wasn't going to use that in sort of in an interview process. I knew that I was going to find my own way, if you like, and make my own money, and that's what I did. But I wouldn't say that, I often think I've achieved what I like to think is quite a lot in my short time in sort of the business world. But what would I have achieved if I had stayed on or had an education, a really good education? That might have been quite a potent, a combination there. So to have sort of the mindset of an entrepreneur and have the education to go along with that, I think that could have been quite dangerous, if you like. But it's worth thinking about. I often think about it.
It's a funny subject, because in some ways you're led to believe, and I was definitely led to believe when I was younger, if you don't get a good education in school, you are going to literally amount to nothing. And there can be some truth in that, but I think that's the wrong kind of spin on it. I think if you have a good education, it helps.
Yeah.
But it doesn't guarantee success, and it doesn't guarantee a job. I think what gives you more of a guarantee that you're going to go somewhere in life is your drive, determination, and mindset. And if you can be educated on the way, that really helps.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you're educated and you've got that drive and mindset, then it's going to get you far. But you can be an educated derelict. I mean, you only have to look around you. You can bump into people that have had the best educations in the country, and they're waifs, and they don't really achieve much. They either leave, they've got family money, they don't really do a lot, they've got no drive or ambition. I've seen it all the time. I mean, but it depends on the individual. You've got to have drive either way if you really want to achieve great things. And it doesn't have to be about building wealth or money. That's not the greatest achievement that you can. You don't lay in bed on your deathbed thinking, I've got 2 million quid or 10 million quid in the bank. It'll be about your life achievements, whether you've achieved your goals, and that can come in lots of different ways. But yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. It doesn't matter. You can achieve great things from coming from the local comprehensive and being expelled at 14 or 15, or you can achieve great things having a fantastic private education, one of the best, going to the best schools in the country. But the roles can be reversed as well. So yeah, that's important, a message to get out there.
So Bethnal Green you're from, is that right? Yeah. Obviously a London boy, same as myself. Your first job, or maybe the only job, door to door. I never had a stint at door to door. A former business partner of mine, an affiliate, used to do it, and it was to do with the Sky, installed in Sky at people's houses, doing door to door. And there was a lot of successful people actually climbing up the ranks doing that. But it's very, very hard graft. And I never done that, but I was telephone sales, and I would say there was a lot of mindset traits and a lot of skills and a lot of determination, similarities that you needed to have, whether you're pitching over the telephone or doing door to door. But I would have liked to, now looking back, have had a stint for about a year with door to door, because I really feel it builds your resilience. So talk to me about door to door. Why did you step foot into that?
Oh, do you know what? I'd like to say there was a real good reason for it, but other than being hungry, I can't say there was, to be honest with you. You know, I think it was more out of desperation, to be fair. And it was a short stint. I mean, I was the door-to-door work I did. It's funny that you found that, but I think it was a carpet cleaning or something like that. I remember the name of the company, and it was quite disheartening. I mean, I was getting up. They'd put you in vans. They'd drive you out to the suburbs. They'd get you knocking on people's doors, and they'd give you the patter, and there'd be two old people opening the door, and you've got to go in there, and it was quite disheartening, even as a young lad at sort of 16, 17. I mean, that didn't really last long. I had a couple of jobs. I was a site labourer for a while, and I'd done a bit of that, but it's all quite, I mean, when you've really had to do some graft and get dirty, it does sort of, and you come home with calluses on your hand for sort of 30 quid a week. It's quite good. It's character building for sure, and it makes you actually stronger and more driven in some respects. That's one of the good things about having to find your own way in the world, and not relying on people for handouts. If you've actually had to go and earn a few quid, it makes you value money more for sure.
Absolutely. What I like about the sales aspect, though, and also labouring, I've done a few stints in labouring. I was a plumber actually when I first came out of school. So, and you were basically a labourer stroke plumber as an apprentice before you become a thoroughbred plumber or pipe layer. And I think the manual work, some people really suited to it. I definitely wasn't. I hated it with a passion. And then with the sales, I always could see an end goal with it, because I could see other salespeople who were very good and experienced. They were driving the nice cars, they had the nice suits, they had the nice watches, they appeared to have the nice lifestyle. But I think the most eye-catching thing for me, they were super confident, and I wanted to be like that. Yeah. And I knew that it was the resilience they were building up, because they were getting setback after setback, and there was cliche quotes everywhere in this sales organisation, and one of them was success. I don't know if it's word for word, but it's success is 99% failure, and that was said by Honda, who obviously made the Honda car and the wonderful engine that they've got. And I remember reading some of these books and looking at some of these quotes and thinking, okay, every time I get a no, I'm closer to a yes. And I think when you've got that mindset, it allows you to push on. But in school, going back to that, they don't teach you that. They don't teach you about, if you get a no, then you can push on. No.
There's a lot of sounds like you guys, or you personally, may have experienced that. Sort of, you'll never amount to anything if you don't knuckle under, if you don't do your. I mean, I had all that. I had teachers telling me that I would amount to nothing, that I would end up, jobless, homeless. I was going to be. I would never achieve anything in life, and it's quite disheartening, really, to be quite honest with you. But I was always fairly confident as a young person, even at the age of 11, 12, in my own ability to be able to feed myself. I mean, I was always fairly self-sufficient as a young kid anyway, and to have these teachers tell, it just makes you a little bit more stronger, to be honest with you. But yeah, I left school when I was 15, sort of drifted in and out of various jobs for a couple of years, and then got my teeth into something. I think it's really important to do something you really enjoy, because it doesn't feel like a job anymore. So I used to love, as a young lad, I always had motorbikes. So my mum used to go mad. They were stripped down in bits. There'd be like engines under my bed and in the bottom of the cupboard, and she'd go crazy. But that was sort of probably a sort of an apprenticeship to what I was going to do later after leaving school. So when I after drifting in and out of jobs and doing sort of various door-to-door sales and then labouring for about 8 or 9 months and those sort of jobs, I really wanted to actually make my own way. I didn't really want to be shoveling shit for someone else, to be quite honest with you. I started to, I think I bought an old car. I saved up a couple of £100, went out and bought my first car, got it home, polished the hell out of the bumpers, buffed it up, and then turned a profit on it. And I thought, this is good because I actually enjoy this. I like these old cars. It was an old MGB at the time. I think it was about £300. And that's how it all started for me, really, the buying and selling, to be honest with you. It was in the sort of classic car game. So went out and with that little bit of money that I made, I tried to keep hold of it, went out and bought a better car and that. And within a sort of a year or two, I had a few cars on the drive and it was sort of gathering pace. So it was quite good for me. And I was supplying cars to some of London's better showrooms, if you like, because I used to travel around all over England. I used to get on a train. I didn't mind getting up at 5 a.m. and getting on a train, going up and up to Scotland, collecting cars and driving them back. But again, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the process of taking something that wasn't very smart and sort of making it look pretty and making a profit out of it. I enjoyed that process. I mean, I'm not really, to be honest with you, a typical I wouldn't class myself as a salesperson. I used to listen to some of those salespeople in the carpet cleaning game when we were talking about the knocking on the door, and I used to be quite cringy of it, really. I thought I couldn't actually say that to those people. I was watching 2 old people there and they're telling them, and it's not really me, to be honest with you. And I think part of the success of what I do, or what we did in terms of the TV show and how that came across, is that they didn't think I was a salesperson and they quite liked it, the viewers and the customers, to be quite honest with you. I would definitely not class myself as a salesperson. If you put me in a gallery and tried to get me to sell a painting, I'd be no good. I'd be useless at it, probably. If you sit me down and ask me how I'm going to borrow some money and show me what you got in your top drawer or in your bank vault or whatever, we could put a deal together. But in terms of a salesperson, I wouldn't class myself as a salesperson.
Okay, fair enough. I resonate with what you say there as well, because when I was listening to the first place I ever started at, there was some very, very good stuff I was being taught, mostly about mindset and goals and stuff. But then there was a bit cheesy kind of cliche sales techniques. There's one I always remember, which is feel, felt, found. And it's like, even if I say it today, I'm like,
it doesn't come out of your mouth very well, does it?
It's so cheesy. And it's like, do people honestly say that and get success?
But you know what? They do. It's really weird, because I was with some of these top salespeople at this door-to-door carpet place I was telling you about. I mean, they were like, I would watch them from across the road. Every door they knocked on, they got in, and they were telling me, no, you must say this, and this is, and like that. I can't remember of any of them now, but they all had their little script. I was no good at scripted stuff. I'd knock on the door and saying, listen, my governor's over the road, please let me in, and just let me look at your carpet for a little bit, and that's how I got through the door. But, that's not really me, but it seems to work for the business I'm in now. They like to sort of, I always said, people are fed up with people in suits and ties telling them they can't have a loan or can't get hold of any money. And that's why we've sort of scored quite well in terms of getting funds to clients where the banks have failed in some respects, because they've got so many hoops to jump through. I'll always find an excuse to do a deal, not an excuse not to do a deal. And if there's a way we can work around it, we will do. And that's I think that came across on the TV show.
For sure. So I've just got some notes here. So leaving school at 15. Yeah. Touched on the door-to-door. I've got a quote here that it's probably not verbatim, but it said something along the lines of, I will never work for anyone again. And then later on, you went into selling property in Cobham, which you got a lot of the Chelsea footballers as clients, and you were selling high-end real estate. So the quote, I mean, how accurate was that quote? And it's kind of going off what you said at the start, where authority didn't really like to be told what to do, so therefore being an entrepreneur and being a lone wolf was probably more suitable to you. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, the properties you're talking about, I built those properties, so I wasn't in sales then, but we built them from the ground and marketed to we had Chelsea footballers looking at those as well, but it was so happened at a time when Chelsea moved their ground to the suburbs and came out to Cobham where we were. Yeah. From a very early age, I realised that I couldn't actually be told what to do by someone, and it was a problem. It was an issue.
How are you with being told what to do now?
There's not many people that tell me what to do, actually, but I mean, it doesn't sit that well with me. But to be honest with you, I mean, I don't know. I just wanted to be in control of my own destiny and my own ship. And if it fails, it fails. And it's, I can't say that everything I've ever done has worked, because it hasn't. And I don't believe there are any people out there, well, not many successful people that haven't experienced some sort of failure. Because if they hadn't, then they wouldn't have been trying hard enough. So yeah, I've had things flop. I've lost money. I've done deals that haven't worked out. But it's a roller coaster. And it's it's challenging, and it's a gamble to a degree. Okay, it's an estimate. You're trying to you're weighing the odds in your favour, if you like. It's a gamble when you've got to weigh the odds in your favour to come out on top if you're doing it over a period of a lifetime. But I think generally it works for me, to be honest with you. And I go a lot on gut as well. So yeah, we do all our due diligence. We check people out. We, do all our research on the clients. Then we look at the goods, and then we do look at the invoices and for certain goods, and then the provenance and so forth. But we're living in an age where these things, there's so many scammers out there trying to have one over on you. And we're talking about large sums of money, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds. So you've got to be really careful. And I think the gut instinct part of the business, which is where I come in, because I can't expect everyone you employ to have a gut instinct. It's sort of a little bit of a joke in the company. James said that was going to happen. And that's my strength. I've got some wonderful people working for me who understand about watches, diamonds, gemologists, all sorts of art, everything. I've got them in my, in camp, if you like. And I say that they're really the knowledge. They're the knowledge. I'm just steering them in a direction. And they come to me with a sort of like a little sort of endorsement, if you like. Oh, we've got this client, blah, blah, blah. He come in, I said, right, have you done your check? Yeah, gone through that, and we're happy with that. And then, usually it'll be fine. But now and again, I'll just pick up on something and I say, okay, well, when did they come in? How did they get there? What did they take? And, there's something a little niggler, if you like, that doesn't quite add up. And we dig a little bit deeper. And then sometimes we unearth something where this client isn't quite correct, or the goods that he's presenting to us isn't correct. So yeah, it's quite a useful it's quite a potent combination to have my skills in that respect, and the individuals that work for me, their skills, because they're experts in their fields.
Before I get on to the pawnbroking side of stuff, because I think that's going to be a whole big chapter of this podcast, and I'm really intrigued by it.
Yeah.
Property.
Yeah.
If you look at all the billionaires in the world, I mean, it's probably transitioning now. A lot of them are going into like the tech stuff and maybe cryptocurrency. But I still think today that a major amount of their wealth is in and preserved by property. You know? And, what's the first thing that when you become a success you buy? Probably a nice watch, probably a nice car, and probably a nice big house.
Yeah.
So why is it that you stepped into the property world and wanted to pursue that as a career?
Well, it was sort of a natural progression for me, really, to be honest with you. It was like the cars. So I was buying a beaten up old car. We'd take it, we'd strip it down, we'd paint it, we'd make it look pretty, we'd sell it on. And that's really how I got into the property. So I was buying stuff at auction, really, to start with. That was almost derelict. Had holes in the roof, had weeds growing up. And then we'd sort of like I didn't mind getting my hands dirty in that and trying to make something that was ugly look very pretty appealed to me. It still sort of does, but and it really was the same sort of ethos as, it's the same sort of thing we were doing with the classic cars. I was doing with the houses, and that's how that sort of evolved. And again, I had some really strong results early on. The first two properties I bought doubled in money within about 12 months. Okay, I was buying in a rising market, coming out of the recession of what year was it? 88, 90, around that time when the interest rates were sky high. I think they were up at 15% at one point. But coming out of that, the government was quite keen to kickstart the market. They were doing a lot of really good mortgage deals like buy-to-lets, and they were doing a cashback thing where you put down a silly little bit of money and you got most of it back. So there were some really great deals. So you could get a portfolio together quite quickly. So what I was doing, I was buying these 1 or 2 units, turning them around, putting them back on the market, earning money that way. I was still doing the cars as well because that was sort of my passion. And then I thought, well, actually, I want to hold on to some of this because there's my parents and my grandparents, bricks and mortar. It's always the old saying, isn't it? And it's true. You can't go wrong with it. They're just, it's a steady eddy. Yeah, it has its ups and downs, but it always bounces back. Always bounces back. And if you look over a lifetime of owning a property, generally you do very well out of it. So I started to build up a portfolio of rental property, residential, and I was buying one every sort of 6 months for quite a while, actually. Built up quite a nice portfolio. Initially renting out to students and turning them into sort of bed sits. And then as I progressed and got more sort of houses together, it sort of went up a little bit more up market. But yeah, by the time I was about 35, I'd amassed quite a nice little portfolio.
How many properties?
I think I was up to about 14 or 15. And
Nice.
I was doing the houses, the cars as well. And some other stuff. I mean, I had quite a lot of things going on. I was importing furniture from India as well, containers of furniture. So, yeah, I mean, I sometimes think I should have really concentrated maybe on one thing, but I quite like having lots on at the same time. And, maybe I could have got a massive portfolio of property. I might have done really well out of it, but I like new challenges. So, yeah, I had the property thing going, and I was going to India as well. I was travelling around India from early 20s, really. And I thought, one day I might want to bring some of it because there was some great stuff out there. And I just flew out there one year and I said, I did all my partying down in Goa and I went up to Bombay and I thought, I'm going to fill some containers with this stuff. We'll do really well out of it. So brought it all back to England. Yeah, I've done quite well out of it. It was good fun as well. I like new challenges.
Good stuff. So I don't know whether it was good timing, coincidence, or you could predict the future, but the research I've got here, it looks like that you came out of most of your businesses or the property stuff around about 2008 because the credit crunch, global world crisis was about to kick off and you could see that. So tell me a bit more about that gut instinct or your knowledge about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not out of it. I mean, last couple of years I built 3 or 4 houses, new builds. But I mean, in 2008, we had the Lehman Brothers, the crash. And literally overnight, really, the banks had pulled the rugs from under the feet of some really good individuals that had extensive portfolios, done really well in property development. I mean, I live in Weybridge in Surrey, so it's commuter land. There's some lumpy stuff up there and around St George's Hills, and I know a lot of the developers that were building out. I went to school with some of them. So the market sort of tumbled overnight. The bank, well, you know what happened. The bank price, all the shares went down. The banks were pulling in all their loans. I was actually really fortunate because I just sold one of the properties. I think it was around. About 2 million quid or 2.2 million. And then we had another one on the market that had just exchanged, and it was a matter of like weeks, to be honest with you, and it all crumbled. And we just exchanged, so it was really good. And we had some money coming in, and I just sat back and I thought, and there was being offered land, and it was the same plots of land almost daily, getting cheaper by the day. And I could see what was happening. It was just all falling apart. And within a matter of weeks, you'd be crazy to start buying up bits of land. Unless you had an endless pot of money, then it's great. That's the time to buy. No one ever made bundles of cash on a level playing field. It's the dips and troughs that you make your money. So, but I had some cash in the bank. Wasn't looking to go into any more property. The development wasn't looking good. I knew it would take years to recover. I thought, well, what am I going to do? I've sort of put everything, wasn't really involved in the cars anymore. The import company had sort of fizzled out. Development had become my sort of world, if you like, over the sort of that 10-year period. And I thought, what am I going to do now? I've got some cash, but can't really get involved in any development because I can't, I've got to feed myself for the next sort of few years, and I can't see the market rising that quickly. So I was looking at an article, actually in the Times, I think, Sunday Times. I was having a cup of coffee in Cafe Rouge and I'm sitting outside. I'd been hearing our friends of mine were pulling up. They're all moaning. The banks they're all still driving around in their Bentleys and their Rolls Royces and their Mercs and what have you. And they're all moaning about the banks, and some of these guys are serious players. They were very wealthy individuals, and they were telling me that, I heard some horror stories. They couldn't pay their children's school fees, petrol, nothing, it was really bad. And I was thinking, well, this don't sound right. You're going back to your sort of £6 million houses up St George's Hills. You've got a Ferrari over there. What's going on? And they were telling me, the people that they're the bank managers, where they'd normally just get on the phone and say, listen, can you put another 30 grand in the bank account because I've got a bit of a cash, that would be done. That wasn't happening. They were still playing golf with these bank managers, but they just weren't able to help them. So I was thinking, well, I've got a bit of cash. How can I? Because I could see that the assets that they had, I could value them. Whether it was their art, their jewelry, I knew I would find a way, if you like, to value these goods. I knew I was capable of that. I would just need to work out what wasn't my strength was the sort of contractual side, because I didn't know too much about that. And I thought, well, if I can find a way where I can funnel this money to them, they can give me their goods, we could sort of put something together. And I happened to sort of be looking through the Times at the same time as all this was going on. And I saw a thing about America, and there was someone in America lending money against art to wealthy individuals and portfolios of art. Can't remember who the bank was. It was, anyway, they'd set up in the States. I think it was in New York. And I thought, well, we could do that here, or I could do that here. And then I thought, well, why would I just do the art? Why wouldn't I do the cars? And then I know they've got jewelry and wine and other things. So I thought, well, pawnbrokers must do that. That's pawnbroking, really, isn't it? You take something in, you get some money, you leave, they look after it for you. I thought that seems quite secure to me. So it all seemed logical, if you like. So I could see that this could be a business. I was very surprised when I started looking on the internet for those types of lenders in the UK, and I sort of put pawnbroking in. I couldn't think of any other, where else to look. I knew the banks didn't do it because I knew that. I just knew they wouldn't be interested. A, they wouldn't be able to value the stock, and B, they wouldn't have the appetite for it. So I thought, well, pawnbrokers, there must be a sort of high-end pawnbroker out there. So I sort of Googled it, and I was looking, I'm thinking, no, it's really boring. The pawnbroking industry is all beige and gold watches and bits of, like chains and things. I think there must be someone out there doing some sexy stuff, and there wasn't really anyone in that market. So I was involved in an electrical. I almost forgot. I was actually involved in an electrical testing company at that time. We just set it up, but it wasn't really doing much. And I thought, you know what, this isn't really. I could sort of dump out of this, sell it to my partner. But one of the girls there was quite good at sort of researching. I said, listen, just look into pawnbroking, see if you can get a license, and try and get us a license. And she said, well, what do you want to call it? She'd done a bit of work. I said, well, we'll call it Prestige because it's, high end. And I said, try Prestige and see if you can get us a license. So she sort of looked at it. About 3 days later, she said, well, we've got a meeting with the National Pawnbrokers Association. The guy's going to come down. It was a lot easier then, to be quite honest with you. It's changed, highly regulated business now, but it wasn't quite as regulated back then. And
not as much red tape.
No, and so it was a lot easier. I'm glad I did it then. So this guy come down and he said, well, what are you trying to do? It was a really lovely old-fashioned type. It wasn't a typical pawnbroker, but he was he was one of the lads you could talk to. And I said, well, what I want to do, and he looked at me, he said, really, that's what you're going to do? I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to do cars. I'll do the jewellery as well, same as the normal pawnbrokers of the average on every high street you see. But I want to do cars, and I'm going to do some art, and if they've got wine collections. So I think he looked at me as if I was nuts, and He went away. He said, "Well, this is what you need to do. This is how you get your license. You need a premises though first. We can't issue you a license without a premises." Tell me if I'm going on.
No, it's perfect. Really good.
Okay, so he said, I can't issue you a license without having a premises. So the girl who worked for me, I said, listen, is there any shops up here? I was in Weybridge. I didn't want to travel too far. I thought Weybridge would be good anyway. Then the more I thought about it, Weybridge, that's where you really want to be if you're going to do this, in Weybridge. So she said, well, there's a little hat shop up there. It used to be a hat shop, just closed down. We'll go in there. I've got an appointment to go in there. So we've rocked up in the morning. Agents let us in, walked into this really long, narrow, skinny little shop, gone down the back, opened the cupboard door, and in the cupboard was a safe, massive safe, big old thing it was. I said to the fellow, safe in a hat shop, what's going on here? He said, no, this used to be a pawnbroker's. I said, a pawnbroker's? What, in Weybridge? Why would you do that? He said, well, yeah, the guy was a bit, he was out there. He was the first person in the UK to loan against cars. And that's what he concentrated on. I'd never heard of him, this guy, but he's long gone. We're talking about he would have been there in the 80s. These safes, you don't move them around too much because you leave them in situ. So I thought, well, this could be a good omen. And he went on to tell me that this guy did so well in the 80s that he had hangars full of Rolls Royces. So this really sort of inspired me I thought, well, I'm onto something here. So, we set up, we got that, we ended up with the shop. We ended up marketing, doing as much. We were doing I had people running around Tesco's car park, putting leaflets on windows, on windscreens and all sorts. I think the difficult thing was getting the word out there. Because I could see the people outside the shop driving up and down looking for some money, and I was sitting in the shop wanting to give it to them, but I couldn't get. Obviously, people who knew me had heard about it, were coming in, and we were doing some deals, but it wasn't gathering pace. To be quite honest with you, it took quite a long time, and even when we first opened, we were sitting there, and no one came in for about 3 days, and then a fella come in and he sort of looked around and we were all sort of stood up, all really excited to see him. And he went, are you the hairdressers? And I went, no, the hairdressers are next door. So I was all disappointed. But, I had a jeweller come on board. So an old-fashioned jeweller, he knew his stuff. He was there helping me and I was doing the cars. We were researching the wine. That's how we started. But going back to the marketing side, it took a while to gather pace. Now that's because we had done something new. People weren't really looking, no one was putting into Google, pawn my piece of a fine art. That wasn't a thing in Google. No one had ever thought of it. So they weren't searching for me because they didn't know I was there. Yeah. I think the biggest moment for us is we had some really good press. So because of the economic situation, the press, that type of business, money lending became very topical, and the press were getting in touch with the Pawnbroking Association and say, right, we want to speak to someone who lends against things. Who have you got out there that lends? And they were sort of talking about the normal pawnbrokers, and they said, well, you might want to speak to James. He does some funny stuff. I don't know how well he's doing, but he's got, so I said, well, Joe, what does James do? Oh, he lends against, and then obviously it sparked something for the press. They loved it because they'd not heard of it before, and it was something they could get their teeth into. So they could, we had the BBC World News, I think, were the first people to come down, talk to us, and we were on the one show. We'd done a lot of press in the space of about 8 months. So we were on TV quite regularly, and we'd been featured in the Times ourselves and all the glossy magazines. We were, because we were doing some very unusual, sexy stuff. And at the beginning, we didn't have the clients. But when it went out and when it was aired, suddenly we had the calls. So, for example, I think it was the Times. I think it's You Magazine and the Times. I think that's the right Sunday publication. They phoned me up, one of the editors, and said, have you got anything that's aimed at women? We're doing a feature on women that want to sell or borrow money. And I was thinking, well, what have I got? Just the normal. Then I said, well, handbags. We do handbags. They said, well, what do you mean you do handbags? I said, well, we buy and sell handbags and we loan again. Now, at this point, I'm not going to say I'm a liar, but we hadn't really done that many handbags. I didn't even know if there was really that much of a market. I think some old lady around the corner brought in a Chanel, which we'd bought. And they said, well, can we send a photographer down and take some pictures of you with these handbags? And I thought, oh, that's done it. I've only got 2 bags. So I went home, got my mum's handbags. We put them on the desk. They took this lovely picture and they'd done a beautiful article about us lending money. The truth is we would lend money against the bags. So they'd done a lovely feature on us. And from that day onwards, we really did push that market. If there wasn't a market in the UK for buying and selling of that second-hand luxury leather goods, really, it didn't exist. We made that market. That story, and then featured on the TV after, made that market in the UK. There wasn't really somewhere where you could sell your Chanel or Hermes bag. It didn't really exist. You sold it to a friend or you left it in the back of the cupboard. So that's an example of how powerful the press can be, or the ability to have the exposure is really important. If you're doing something really niche, if you've got a car showroom, get your car showroom, just light it all up at night and get it out there. But if you're doing something that no one has done before, or there's very few of you doing it, it's quite hard to get traction. And I found that it's very difficult. But as soon as the press got hold of it, the news got hold of it, it became topical. People really got, they thought I was getting calls from all over Europe. I was getting asked to fly out to Germany and talk on their news channels. I was getting calls from America. And then, obviously, the Channel 4 thing for us happened. So they phoned me up one day, this after about a year of all this, about 2 years maybe. They phoned up and said, listen, we heard you do some sexy assets. We want to come down and talk to you. I said, all right. I was sort of a bit dubious. I was thinking, no, this is going to be some sort of expose. They're going to reel me in here and sort of mug me off on national TV. I don't really like the sound of it. So they come down. They said, well, look. I said, I'm not really that bothered, to be quite honest with you. I don't really like. I've got a lot of there's personal belongings here. I've got personal data. What is it you're trying to do? So I was a bit sort of cagey with them. They said, look, you've got nothing to worry about. We just want to know what you do. And I said, well, it ain't that much fun. I said, it's just, we just lend money. I didn't really think it was of that interesting to Channel 4. I didn't really see how they were going to make an hour TV show out of it. Anyway, so they come down. They said, well, look, please, can we just sit in the corner? We won't even make a noise. We'll just sit in the corner and we're just going to listen to you talk. So I said, all right. And so I'm sitting there, and I had my PA with me at the time. And me and her used to just rip it out of each other all day long. So we're sitting there, we're saying things. He's writing it down. He sort of loved it. He was getting carried away. And then I had some phone call. I think it was about something really bizarre. I think it was a jet or something. So I picked up the phone. He said, do you know? Because on our early days in our, which I don't think we've got it on there anymore, but did so few of them, but we were doing aeroplanes. So, this guy phoned up from, it was one of the African countries. He said he had a jet. And we were like, you've got a jet? And, the guy was writing all this down. And then he went away. And we went outside, and me and Joe were like, I was my PA. I said, what's he talking about? So we got up, listened to the door, and I could hear him going, I think I've got something here. This is amazing what's going on down. It was a tiny little pawn shop, no bigger than this room, to be honest with you. So he come back in, he was all excited. He was like a dog with, yes.
2 dicks.
2 dicks, yes. Dog with 2 dicks. I wasn't going to say it. So he was like a dog with 2 dicks. Anyway, come back in. He said, listen, we want to do a pilot. And I said, well, a pilot. I said, what does that involve? So I was all very negative. I don't know why they pursued it, to be honest with you. They said, well, look, we're going to come down with film with you. We're just going to make a little pilot and we'll show it to you. And if you like it, then you might want to take it further. We want to make it into, we'll see if it gets commissioned. And I said, all right then, go on then. So they come down, mics are all up, cameras everywhere, GoPros, filming your every move. And anyway, they put this thing together, sort of like a little show reel. I think it was about 15 minutes long. Sat us in a room. This was about a month later. And we looked at it and we thought, shit, that looks bloody good. It looks and I could see myself wanting to watch it. It was entertaining. He said this is really good. He said, you don't realise what you're doing here is pretty cool. And I said, all right. He said, well, we're going to present it to Channel 4. We're going to see if they want to commission it. And with a bit of luck, they might make a 1 hour show for you for primetime TV. So I said, all right. Anyway, cut a long story short, 2 weeks later, we got a phone call. They love it. They're all over it. They want to make a 1 hour show. Can we send a TV crew down there? They'll be with you. They'll be embedded with you for 6 weeks, blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, oh shit, what are we going to do? What if we sit here and the phones don't ring? That'd be the worst thing that could ever happen. So anyway, they come down, they set us all up, and it was quite lucky because we'd had so much exposure with the BBC and all the newspapers that we were actually getting the calls in volume. So it was, some days you sit there, you wouldn't get really anything too interesting. They were grabbing people as they were coming in, micing them up, and they got this TV thing together. It was quite good. We did have one nice story in there about a local guy that wanted to borrow against his helicopter. So that sort of jazzed it up a little bit, elevated it. But they had some lovely pieces in there. Piece of, I think it was a piece of a diamond necklace and some quite lumpy gear on the first pilot. And that went out, I think it was a Thursday night, 7:00. And we got everyone together locally. We went into this pub and we watched it. And it was just, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, I was nervous as hell, but they said to me, James, you do realise when this goes out, your life will never be the same. And I was thinking, what are they talking about? Never be the same. It's a 1 hour TV show. So they put this out there within about, I think it broke a lot of viewing records at that time. Within about, it was about 2 weeks, they come back to me and said they want to make a series. And I said, a series? I thought, shit, that's quite a lot of commitment. I think, that's going to be a lot of work because it's quite tiring. They said, we're going to put them here, I said, a series, hold on a minute, how many? I think the first one was 4 or 5. And I was thinking, hold on, that's 6 weeks per show. Times, they'll be here forever. So anyway, but sure enough, they were there forever. But because we got, I think it was, I can't remember how many series now, but they made 51 hour shows. If it takes 6 weeks to do an hour, you can do the math. So they were there for years. But they'd done the series, and again, great fun. And the more they were aired, so when that first show went out, people were looking at it thinking, I've got one of them. I can go in and see James. The phones were just ringing off the walls, to be quite honest with you. We were getting a lot of calls, and it made it sort of self-perpetuate itself in some respects, because the more they were aired, the more phone calls we were getting, the more juicy material that we would have to film. So, and we were just really happy that the phones were, and we outgrew that little shop within months, really. I mean, we were there for quite a while, but we outgrew it. Then we were on our second and third and fourth, and then we went up to Manchester. We've got 9 units now. But it all sort of kicked off when the show was aired. And it was quite funny because we got a lot of stick for that, to be quite honest with you, from other pawnbrokers who didn't want it to be aired. They weren't happy about it. They didn't want this young, I wouldn't say young, I wasn't that young, but I mean it's an old established sort of trade, isn't it? And they thought, who is this fella? He's come along, he's doing this, he's getting the TV. And I was like, we were phoning up saying, well, we're coming to the National Pawnbroking. Well, can we bring the cameras with us? No, we don't want any cameras down here. They didn't like it. They didn't want it, But the funny thing is, when that show was aired, their phones rang off the wall as well. So I was getting phone calls from them saying, this is the best thing that's ever happened to the industry. Thank you so much, James. After giving us so much stick for going along with it and putting it out there was some people actually in the industry who saw the benefits of it. And there was a lot of benefits for it. And I think it turned the word pawnbroker into, in the psyche of the borrower, it meant something else from that day onwards. I really believe that.
What a journey, mate. I want to talk more about the TV and how your life did change for good or worse. But I want to talk just quickly about the entrepreneurial gene or mindset you've got, because the typical thought process by careful individuals is do something when you're 100% ready. So go into a business when you're 100% ready. And I get the logical side of that. The big problem with that is you're never going to be 100% ready. There's no such thing. No. And I listened to a few quite successful entrepreneurs, predominantly in property, And one of them said something one day, not directly at me, but to this audience, and I was in that audience, and they said, get 70 to 80% ready, then go for it. And you'll pick up the other 20, 30% or whatever it may be by learning on the job.
Yeah.
And it reminds me a bit like your story, because you wasn't from that world, but you saw a gap in the market, had an epiphany moment at Cafe Rouge. Obviously, the climate was changing. I think you've got to be open-minded to your surroundings, what's going on, which is one element of it. But then there's a gap in the market, and you just went for the license, got the license. And I think in one of the articles I read, you actually quote, I didn't really know what I was doing.
No, I didn't. Yeah.
And it's very much similar to what I do here. I mean, I'm not from the art market. I saw something that I was really passionate about, and I was learning on the job. And now, since 2014, I know a lot about the market. Still nowhere near an expert or know everything. You're always learning, but I know certainly more than most. And I kind of can resonate with your journey there. And how important is it to see something and within reason take a calculated decision and a calculated risk to step foot into that area and pursue something?
Well, I think of it as almost like doing another trade, to be quite honest with you, setting up a business. There's an element, if there wasn't any risk in it, it's probably not going to be that rewarding to be, because everyone would be doing it. So that's my first sort of trail of thought with it. And another thing is I actually enjoy the risk. If it was risk adverse and there was no risk at all involved in it, I probably wouldn't do it. I know it probably sounds crazy, but I actually get a kick out of a little bit of risk. And I'm, even when I was first started property, I was saying, I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to do that. And I was people, even family members, well, what do you know about that? And I thought, well, I don't know anything, but I'm sure that the other people that are into it didn't know anything when they first bought their first house as well. So, and I was sort of like, when someone tells you can't do something, it's almost like, no, actually, I can do it. I can do it. If someone else has done it, I can do it. And I'm of that sort of, I can't say that the day I opened my pawnbrokers, it was the most smooth running pawnbrokers in the country, because for sure it wasn't. It was probably the worst running. But in terms of having all your ducks lined up and all the paperwork in order, and everything filed away, it wasn't. It was probably chaos, to be honest with you. Am I running my business successfully or in a correct and proper fashion now? 100%. And I've learned it, and I've been in this now for coming up for 14 years. So I've had 14 years of trading, buying and selling, and lending against high-end assets. I'm probably the most skilled person in that arena in the country now. But yeah, for sure, when I set out, I didn't know anything about it. You have to learn on the job, and I don't believe you can be 100%. If you are, I would have missed the boat if I'd have learned about pawnbroking, studied every asset that I was going to get involved with before I bothered advertising that I was going to get involved with it. I would have been. You don't pick up. That's a lifetime of skills that takes 14 years to develop, and I'm still learning now. So you can't be 100% prepared for every eventuality. I don't believe. Some people probably would be 100%, but are they going to? Not in the things that I would want to get involved with and how I would want to conduct myself. I didn't have the time to sit down and rehearse what I was going to do. It was I've got to do it now. The time's now, and if I don't do it now, this is, and I was right. I was right. And there's a lot of cases like that. It could be anything. I've been offered so many before even the pawnbroking thing. I was offered so much stuff in my time, just stuff. And if you shy away from it, sometimes you just sit back and you kick yourself thinking, why didn't I get involved with that? I was slow off the mark there. And yeah, you have got to be careful. There's a lot of, there's a lot of things to be concerned about. But I think it's almost like another trade. You weigh up the pros and the cons and the worst case scenario. What's the worst thing that can happen? And if you've judged that or accounted for that correctly, and you can afford to lose sometimes, then I think you're sort of winning, to be honest with you.
So Posh Pawn, obviously your company's called Prestige Pawnbrokers.
Yeah.
Your life changing because of this TV pilot documentary for an hour, broke records, the public loved it, and then they turned it into a series, and it kind of took over your life and changed your life. Life before TV or life after, which one do you prefer?
Well, I mean, they've both got their pros and cons. I mean, I can't. I'm not getting mobbed down the street when I walk. I'm not getting like ladies running at me throwing their underwear or anything like that. So that's not going on.
Well, that's a shame.
Yeah, well, it's a shame. I've tried, believe me. But I think that I can't say there's really a negative to being noted for the TV show. I'm not a hate figure. So there's not. I haven't caused misery and pain out there. So I can't say that I've really experienced that many times where you thought, shit, this is getting on my tits, to be honest with you. I wish I hadn't have done that show there. Obviously, you go out sometimes. I mean, you bump into the odd drunk person who wants to slobber all over you, give you a cuddle, wants you a selfie. But that's all part and parcel of being on TV. I can't complain about it because I put myself out there. So, and to be honest with you, most of the people that have seen the show and want to say hello, I've got no problem with that. I'll sit there. If they want to come over, if I'm in a restaurant, I say, oh, James, I really love what you do. It's nice. I like it. I can't say I don't like it. You know, it's not, they're not, as I said, there's a very few occasions where I thought, shit, this isn't good. I mean, there was one funny thing that did happen to me on a train once. I was on a packed train in the summer and I was standing up. It was like that. And I had my hand on the thing and I'm looking, I've caught this fellow, he's down the other end of the carriage. And he's looked at me and he's sort of like that. You can see his sort of ears prick up. He went, porn man. And I've like looked at him. He went, James, the porn man, right? And I thought, and everyone don't think porn, they think pornography, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like looking at him and I'm thinking, do I answer him? I can't, I've got to sort of say yes, haven't I? So I looked, I went, hi, and everyone sort of just look at, you can tell what they're thinking, that I'm involved in the pornography business. So yeah, apart from that I can't, you know, a couple of incidents like that and the odd drunk person wanting to slobber over your suit if you're out at a function or something. I can't say there's too many negatives. You leave yourself a little bit wide open when you're in the public domain. You know, people, there might be some people out there get a little bit jealous or vindictive or want to bring something up, but generally, I think for most people that are in the public domain, it works out quite well. As I said, I'm not a hate figure. There's people involved in other genres or other things which they might get a lot of stick when they're out. I don't know. I can only talk for myself, and I can only say it's been a positive for me.
Well, I've read books. I've interviewed quite a lot of high-profile people, from athletes to entrepreneurs. And the one thing I resonate and realise is if you've got a following or fame, and you can convert that into, you know, selling your product, selling your services, promoting your own brand, and you are doing it in the right way, I think it's great. I just think sometimes if you've got the fame and there's nothing to kind of capitalise on it, it can turn not so good sometimes. And I think I've had a few people on the podcast who have had lots of fame, but there's not that back end of it, and it's a bit frustrating for them. Yeah,
I mean, for me, it's a little bit different because I actually love what I do. I love that business, the buying. And I mean, I couldn't believe it when I opened the pawnbrokers. I thought, this is all I've ever wanted to do, buy and sell. And now I've got a license to do it. I mean, it was like, you know, it was just fantastic for me, to be honest with you, to be able to legally lend money against some lovely stuff, whether it be a car, a piece of jewellery, a piece of art. It was great. So I've got that. The TV thing to me is secondary. I don't need to be on TV. I wasn't TV ready when they come along. I was a bag of nerves. I was quite an introvert, to be quite honest with you. I shied away from all that. Obviously, because they've aired 51-hour TV shows, I've become accustomed to it. And now saying hello to people in the street or people want to come over and have a selfie, it's not really a problem to me. The show gets repeated. It's on now on Quest at the moment. It's being repeated from day dot. So it's out there again. It gets repeated a lot. So you do still get people wanting to come over and ask you about pawnbroking. I'll get some really lovely messages on Instagram and social media sites and about the business. This morning I got some guy who I think it was actually in Belgium, and he wants to start a pawnbroking. he was saying, look, what advice would you? So those things are nice, though, and I like to tell them what I know and what I've experienced. So, and as I was saying, I wasn't really ready for the TV, and I don't really, although I've been on TV for many years, featured in that show, I'm not a TV person, if you like, really, in the common sense of the word. If someone said to me, listen, James, do you want to go on Love Island? And I've been asked to do some of this stuff. It's not of interest to me, unless it's promoting what I do. I'm not they've got a PR company. They phone me up and they say, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? I said, well, how's that going to help me? I'm every day I wake up and I think about lending money against assets and buying and selling, and I really enjoy it. And yeah, I've got a property development company, that's sort of taken second place, but I enjoy that as well. That when you see a property grow out of the ground, in the same way that Prestige and Posh Pawn evolved, it's sort of, it's my little baby, and I want to nurture it. And people say, are you ever going to sell it? And I think, well, no, not really. What would I do? What would I go and do? Take up golf? I mean, this is like the best thing that could happen to me, if you like. So going off and doing another TV show that wasn't focused on my business, I can't really imagine they'd have to pay me a shed load of money for that.
Mm. I had Mark Wright on here, the winner of The Apprentice. His business partners were Lord Adden and Sugar, and he said the same thing. He said before he went into The Apprentice, he obviously had a life and he was this entrepreneur. Coming out of it, he was, let's say, famous, had a following. Yeah. And he said the facts are, the more following you've got, the more people know about you and your business, you can promote and sell more. And I truly believe in that. And it's part of the reason why I do the podcast as well, because I believe it's self-promotion, self-PR, and you're promoting what you do. And I think people buy into the people before they buy into the brand first. And I'm not saying that Love Island is congruent to pawnbroking, but if you did go on there is an element of thinking, well, you're not promoting lending money, but you're promoting yourself, and then some of that demographic may come over and become clients of yours. Something to think about, James. Yeah,
there is a bit of that. I mean, but look, to be quite honest with you, you've seen what's happened on. There's so many bad endings on that show, on that or those reality TV shows. I mean, I don't know how I'd cope, to be quite honest with you, cooped up with a load of people. Some of them you'd probably drive you mad. So it might not be a wise move for someone like me. I'm probably too long in the tooth for that, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, if you're starting out and you want to get out there and you want to get your name known, I'm not knocking it, but it's just not really me as a person. Yeah. That's why I sort of shy away from that sort of stuff.
I want to ask you about some of the most bizarre and unusual products people bought to you, and I've had conversations about, or you've lent money against.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the typical things about the helicopters, the wonderful art, the Ferraris, the Lamborghinis, Porsches. I mean, they're quite normal kind of things that I would associate a pawnbroker or a lender to lend against.
Yeah.
But I've got other things here. Live racehorse. Moonrock.
Yes.
And probably the most bizarre thing, a slice of Princess Diana's wedding cake.
We've still got that. That's amazing, isn't it?
So, well, number one, how has a wedding cake lasted that long? And two, I mean, how the hell do you lend against... I mean, I kind of understand the racehorse. I get that.
Yeah.
Because, my dad's into racehorse in the betting. There is definitely a market out there. But, I mean... the Moonrock, because Rolex watches, they might use that Moonrock to put in their faces. I get that as well. But a cake doesn't matter whether it's a princess or not. I mean, it's a cake at the end of the day.
I know. When you say it's a cake, it sounds bizarre, but historically, it's an important piece of cake. I mean, these pieces were given to servicemen at that time, and they come with a certificate. They're in a box. I don't really think many people went home and ate that bit of cake. So it's ended up on the market. It wasn't a huge sum of money. And to be quite honest with you, some of the more interesting items are the lower end value. When I say not huge, it's 1,500 quid, couple of grand's worth of cake. So it's still a lot of money. But, we get assets that are worth £1 million in. So it's not in terms of the value spectrum, it's of the lower end. But historically it's important, and that sometimes it's not always about how much it's worth. I mean, the things that spring to mind are some of the lower end things that items that we've had in, like personal letters from celebrities or well-known people famous rock stars that they've written to their mothers. They've just been unearthed. I mean, there was you might have heard of it, but we found some Brian Jones, the Rolling Stones, personal letters that he'd sent his mother, and they were found in the loft of his mother's house in a box with his school tie. Now, not worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, but just as sort of historically, to me, priceless, to be quite honest with you. And when I was looking at these, I was thinking, shit, this is interesting, and I've touched some very interesting items, but this to me was phenomenal that they would be unearthed in the loft of Brian Jones's parents' house years after he died by the new owners as well. Had gone up there, and it was all checked and genuine. There were letters to his mum saying, Mum, I've had my hair cut. I think we're going to make it big sometime, and I'm going out with this lovely girl in Windsor. This sort of stuff you can't really put money on.
Yeah.
It was worth, I think a little collection, I think it was about 12 or 15 grand. We facilitated the sale. But is it worth £500,000? It probably is. You can't really price it. It was worth what we could get for it at the time, and that's the value we got for it. But it's those things to me that are really, really valuable. Yeah, you can turn up with a piece of Cartier that's worth £2 million, but you can go and get another piece of Cartier that's worth £2 million. You can only buy one letter that's written by Brian Jones to his parents.
So I was going to ask you the comparison. I was going to use Rolex Daytona stainless steel.
Yeah.
I think it's 2013-14 version of it. There's a newer one out now. Then you've got something like a Richard Hamilton shadow figure. My understanding of how to price it is you look at size, year and quality, provenance, you take a public domain, private domain, and you can also get an average and you can kind of work out the prices. Rolex watch is a bit more transparent because Rolex are Rolexes, and there's obviously the primary market, secondary market, and it's probably a lot more easier to work out. But when you start going to these really unique items, how do you value it?
Well, it's really quite difficult. I mean, you look at sold data of something, if you can't find the exact piece. Yeah, you're right. When you're talking about something that's bespoke or one-off, and even the best minds in the world don't always get it right. I mean, we valued a piece of jewellery. We actually bought it in, I think we give 150 grand for it. The auction houses told us it was worth it might make between 150 and 200 grand. As it turns out, that piece got so much interest at the auction, it made over £500,000. And these are the best minds looking at it. I mean, it was a piece of Cartier, vintage Cartier, exhibited at the V&A. So quite an important piece of jewellery. But the best people in the industry looked at it and were nowhere near what it achieved. So those, when they're one-offs or bespoke pieces, especially if they're vintage or older, it's very difficult to put a price. I mean, it's difficult enough with your Rolex. We had a Rolex in last week. The guys phoned me up. They said, listen, we got a Rolex. We want to buy it in. I want to give 140 grand for it. I said, all right. I said, how much was it new then? It's a very nice Rolex if you're giving 140 grand for it. New, it was 47 grand. I said, 47 grand. I said, well, how old is it? Thinking it was very old. Oh, it's 18 months old. And I said, no, I'm not really a watch person. I don't wear a watch. Obviously, we touch them and feel them every day, but I'm not an expert. I said, well, hold on a minute. You're telling me that a Rolex, that you've got the invoice, 47 grand, and now you want to give him, I think they ended up paying around 150 grand for it. I said, you want to give him, 3 times the value, 150,000. They said, well, we've looked through the sold data. One just sold for 165. They're going up. A month ago, if we'd have looked at this watch, it would have been 100 grand. They're just climbing. By the time we process it, get it to market, because second-hand Rolexes, sports models at the moment, are going through the roof. I mean, you can't get a better investment, to be quite honest with you. If you can get your hands on one, that's what you should be buying. But obviously, no one knows when the bubble's going to burst, because these things, they always do in the end. And I think that market will eventually, go pop. But we don't know where. At the moment, they're rising. And if you want to compete, or you want to have stock in your stores, or you want to buy and trade, you've got to pay the current market. It's no good saying, well, folding your arms saying, I'm not buying anymore because they're too expensive. You've got to keep buying. So we still buy. We're good buyers of Rolex and all the watches, really, Pateks and the other brands. But it's just amazing, especially Rolex, how they very cleverly are controlling the market, almost like the art world works in some respects with certain artists. They produce in limited numbers. They control where they're sold from. So Rolex are very clever about what they do. They don't mass produce their products. They've got a massive following, very good at branding, very good at marketing, and they can control the price quite easily, really. I mean, they don't say it's easy, but they do it very well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, it's also the dealers as well. I mean, we've done 2 shows now at the London Watch Show. We were the official brand partners the second time round. It was only a month or so ago. It was really, really good. And the sentiment I'm getting is all the watch dealers kind of, I'm not saying they lie or anything like that, but they come up with a bit of a narrative that, maybe this particular brand, not brand, but make or model is going to discontinue. And that word gets round.
Oh, yeah.
And then before you know it, people are like, and the price starts escalating. They can really influence the market because of rumours.
Yeah, it's a little bit like Rolling Stones, their last concert.
Yeah, that's it.
Or Pink Floyd or something. Yeah, so, I think there's a bit of that. I mean, the point is if you buy if you buy second hand as well, you're not really taking a risk with a brand like Rolex or Chanel or Hermes or the big name. You're not taking. They've already had the hit. It's like driving a classic car or a car out of a showroom. They take the hit when you drive out, and then they sort of tend to fall away gradually. Their biggest hit is from new, and I think these watches, these sports models, they took the hit when they were bought a few years ago. Now they're just climbing, and you can't get hold of them. And don't forget, they've become collectible. It wasn't really years ago. People wore Rolex. You wore it. You put it on with your Sunday best. You went out. But now, like, people don't just own 1 or 2 Rolexes. They own trays and trays of Rolexes, and it's driving the market up. And also, it's seen as an investment now in a way that it probably wasn't maybe 10 years ago. So people were actually thinking, savvy buyers are thinking, right, I'm going to go and buy a sports model. I'm going to buy it's going to have the box and papers. It's going to be in pristine conditions. Yeah, I'm going to pay top dollar for it. I'm going to pay probably more than it was when it was new. But I know in 5 years' time, it's probably going to be worth a hell of a lot more. Could be double or triple. There's not many assets you can go and do that with, investment-wise.
And it's hassle-free. There's not really going to be a lot of... it's similar to the art market. There is once you buy it, apart from the storage and also the insurance and stuff, there isn't a boiler breaking down. There isn't a mad tenant calling you at 12 o'clock at night. It's a hand-free investment.
Yeah.
On that note, how would you... Look, I know you're not an art expert, but something like this, I mean, how would you value a rodeo... Richard Hamilton, how would you go about doing that?
Well, I'd go about doing it by phoning one of my experts up, to be quite honest with you.
Okay.
I mean, look, art is it's very subjective, but to be honest with you, the good thing about art is you get pleasure out of it, don't you? A lot of investments, if you're buying gold, you're not getting any pleasure out of that. Put that on the wall. It looks absolutely fantastic, and enjoy it and sleep well at night, knowing that in 5 years' time, you may have doubled your money. That's great.
For sure. I think it also brings a lot of kudos and ego kind of, not ego, what's the word? Like, it's an extension of your education sometimes when you've got a nice, good watch on.
Yeah.
And when you've got a nice piece of art on the wall. When people come around for a dinner and you start having a talking point.
Oh, 100%. I've got a mate like that. He knew nothing about art a few years ago, or wine, or watches. He's earned a fortune over the last 10 years. I go around there, he says, have you seen this? He gets it out, it's the wine, and I'm not really into wine. He's got Banksy's on the wall, he's got all sorts of stuff on the wall, and I'm thinking, where'd you get that? He said, yeah, I've been buying a bit of that investment, that's gone up twofold in the lot. And I'm thinking, how does he know so much so quickly? But he's passionate about it, and he's got a few quid, and he's buying this stuff, and now he understands it. It's quite interesting.
Good stuff. And last point on the art market, I mean, in your time, in the pawnbrokers, I know there's Picassos that have come through your hands, Andy Warhol's, I guess, maybe Banksy's. What other artists have you looked at?
Well, we've done sort of more classical stuff. We do a lot of Lowry's, whether it's sketches and or things like that. But great masters like Munnings and all sorts of stuff, to be quite honest with you. So you get a mixture. We just happen to see, I don't know why, but we see quite a lot of Banksy, to be fair. I think early on we were filmed with a Banksy piece, so it sort of stimulated that in that getting the phones ringing in that respect. So we see probably Banksy more than any other artist.
That's good. That's good. So anyway, we're talking about life before your filming days and life after. With that in mind, I mean, are you ever thinking about going into more TV? I know you said about it has to have an underlying fact that it's got to be promoting your business.
Yeah.
But now you've got a flavour for it. Can you see yourself doing it a bit more kind of diversifying within that respect?
Well, if they offered me something that I was really passionate about, I mean, look, if they said to me, listen, James, you want to present Top Gear or something like that, I'd jump at it, to be honest with you. But that's might not happen. So, but if it wasn't something promoting what I do, and because I'm passionate about what I do and I enjoy it, I enjoy waking up in the morning knowing that I'm involved in this business and we might see some assets. Some of them I know nothing about, and we've got to investigate and we've got to find out. I love it. So it's going to have to take something with a big pull to get me to go and do a load of filming for 6 months or 3 months, to be honest with you. I mean, I've touched on the cars, so if it was something car related, I might have a chance, but you know.
And being on TV, it must have opened up. I mean, look, you've obviously clearly got a lot more clients because of it, and it's got your brand to a much higher state. You probably would have been a huge success anyway, but there's no doubt that, you know, TV media can really accelerate your success far quicker than if you were to do it the traditional way. Must have opened up other doors, like your network, the people that you know now. You must know other celebrities or business owners, and you must be getting other opportunities to invest into companies or invest into this. I mean, talk to me about some of those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, we get, I think you're right. You touched on it earlier about the person behind the brand and about them trusting, or the clients trusting the person. And I think that was a big part of what we did with Posh Pawn. And they saw us, you know, they were a bit sceptical at first about pawnbrokers. They saw the show. They saw how we dealt with people. We'd sit down, talk to them one-on-one, give it to them straight, told them how we got to the values, even explained to them in detail about our valuing process, and they sort of understood it, and everyone was happy. And this was all on TV. So, yeah, it certainly opened up a lot of doors and 100% enhanced the profitability of the company, because it drove clients to our doors. And that's still the case today. So, but people who haven't seen the show for years, because it was first aired, what was it, 8 years ago or something like that, or 7 years ago. So people who haven't seen the show for a long time still remember it. It's amazing. I don't know if it's that name, Posh Pawn. It does sort of stick out in your mind, but it's a trusted brand. And I suppose in certain respects, I'm trusted because I'm on TV talking about what we're doing. And I must have done something right, because the first thing that a lot of people say to me is, say to my team, want to speak to James. You know, we want to speak to him. Is he in because we trust what he tells us about what we're going to do or how we're going to raise the capital. So a lot of people do want to speak to me. They trust the team as well. They know that, you know, there's no punches pulled with what we do. It's all very transparent. Yes, we get a lot of people, going back to your other point, get a lot of people phoning us, contacting us, wanting to invest in other opportunities, but I'm so focused on what we're doing, and I do like to be in control of my own ship. So I've got a lot of other things I could be doing with spare cash myself, to be quite honest with you, to be tying it up with someone else. But sometimes it's just about talking an idea through. So someone might say to me, James, you know, I want to talk to you about investment. I say, well, what is it? So they tell me the idea, and they say, well, what do you think? Do you think that? And I say, well, yeah, that actually could work. If you get that out there and do this and do, you know, it's quite interesting. I'm not always able to help financially, but just hearing about it and them discussing it, like I told you earlier about the guy who wanted to set up a pawnbrokers in Belgium, you know, having that conversation, and this was all via Messenger, actually. It went on quite a while, and he thanked me by the end of the conversation. I hope he took some of it on board. I think I might have given him a bit of insight of the sort of pitfalls, but yeah, I think certainly drives people to us as a brand and me as an individual. Yeah.
So, like, part of owning a business is the creativity, keeping yourself focused, etc. But there's a huge element that has to be with any business, which is fundamental, which is turnover profit. If you don't turn over a profit, you're not a business. How motivated are you by money?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I've got to be motivated by money because my overheads are pretty big. I've got 9 locations, all in high-end retail spaces. I've got about 45, 50 members of staff, and they're all paid relatively. I'd like to think they were paid relatively well in terms of industry standards. So it's a big machine that needs oiling. And you've got to always be thinking about earning money in every deal that you do. You're not always going to earn. There's going to be, out of 100 deals, 2 or 3 of them, you're not going to earn any money. But you've got to, as I said earlier, it's a roller coaster ride. You've got to be generally going in the right direction. And yeah, I am motivated by the money, to be honest with you. And I'm not ashamed of it. That was one of the big things on TV that they got across, is that there's nothing dirty about the word profit. I think there's too much of that going on in the, I think institutions like the banks, they don't want to talk about profit, but yet you're late with your payment. They're first to be repossessing your house or sending you a nasty letter or, giving you a bad marker against your name. But I will talk about it. I'm not going to do all those things because I don't repossess anyone's goods. They don't get a bad credit score with me. But if they don't pay me back, I'm going to have to sell their goods, and I don't want to. If we're talking about the loaning aspect of the business, it doesn't fit. It doesn't sit very well with me having to go to market with someone's goods. That's not what I went into this business about for. I didn't want to be a shopkeeper necessarily. I really wanted to be a money lender. So profitability, definitely got to be profitable, and I want to drive the brand forward. If you don't make enough profit, you're stagnated. You can't grow. If I'm not doing very well, you could have 1 or 2 shops, situated in the high street. But I want to grow the brand and maximise it, and eventually maybe we're in talks, globally with other people who might want to take the brand there. So it's important to be profitable.
You mentioned about there are going to be the unfortunate people that present their luxury goods, they enter an agreement, they default on that agreement.
Yeah.
There's got to be uncomfortable times where people are crying, people are upset, people are saying, look, my house is going to, all that kind of stuff. And you've got to be, some people might call it ruthless, some people just calling it was part of business.
Yeah.
You've got to have that personality and mindset to say, well, business is business, and I've got to recover my own money. How do you deal with that?
Well, it's not an easy thing to deal with, and we've had clients sitting there in tears, to be quite honest with you. Some of them, their relatives have been unwell, or they've had health issues, and some of it was aired on TV. I don't know. Some of listeners might have seen it, and it's not an easy thing to do. And of course, you do what you can, but at the end of the day, we are in business and we are loaning against assets. Now, we're not talking about making someone homeless, putting them on the street. We're talking about value in commodities, luxury items. How damaging can it be to sell someone's watch or ring? I always ask people, look, when they bring a ring into me or a watch, I always try and say to them, look, does this mean anything to you? Because you do realise at the end of 7 months, it may have to go to market. And I always try and steer them down the route of not bringing something in that's their emotion. I wouldn't, if it belonged to their father or their mother, and their mother had passed away or whatever, and it had emotional attachment or sentiment, I would rather they didn't bring it into me, to be quite honest with you, because it doesn't put me in a very good position. Because there are times when we've said, well, we'll hold on to that, or we can't really do that, and it makes us vulnerable as a business. So, but I think the people should be coming to me, and it's very difficult to say, don't bring your stuff in if you're attached to it, because some people, that's the last thing they've got. So it is a part of the business that I find difficult sometimes to cope with, and especially for the teams that are dealing with them face to face every day. When they're having to. Bear in mind though, it's a very small percentage. So we're talking about, I think now it's down to about 12 or 13% of the loans that we do are unpaid, and we have to sell the goods. So it's a small chunk in comparison to the happy customers that come back in and get their goods. Yeah.
There's no doubt when you look at you online, you are seen as a very, very successful entrepreneur, and rightly so, what you said about your TV persona or appearance, you are liked and respected. I couldn't imagine you walking down the street and someone attacking you, maybe like a footballer in, I don't know, a team that should be performing better and they're getting loads of slander chucked at them because they're not performing as an athlete. I think you're positioned differently. Obviously, your brand or what they've said about you is you're a millionaire, multi-millionaire. So I always like to ask, because I always like to think I'm pursuing the same journey as these very successful people. People want to know that once you quote unquote make it, what kind of things you end up doing, what kind of things you end up buying. I mean, being in the porn industry and seeing these luxury goods and the planes and the helicopters and jets and everything else, you must think, well, when I get there, and maybe I have got there, I can start affording this stuff. So what's the type of things that you do with your money, James?
Look, it's going to sound really bad or boring, to be quite honest with you, because people think, well, I'm not personally, I'm not, you see, I've got a little gold ring on that my mother gave me when I left school that belonged to her father. So I'm not into I mean, I see the beauty in these objects, and I can understand why people, in some respects, are obsessed by owning them, and I see it almost on a daily basis. And they spend their last pound note on a Rolex or a Chanel bag. But for me personally, they don't really, and I never really have, even before getting into that. You could say, oh, it's because he sees so much of it, but it's really not. I actually am not that bothered by it. As I said, I can see a beautiful bit of vintage jewellery from the 20s or the 30s, or I can see a beautiful bit, and I can appreciate it for what it is. Do I need to own it? No, I don't. Do I want to own it? Not really. It doesn't really mean that. I'd rather go out and eat in a lovely restaurant, or sit in or go on holiday in a beautiful hotel or in a castle somewhere. That I can honestly say that is the only part that I've sort of maybe spent out on, to be quite honest with you. I probably dine in finer restaurants, and I probably spend more on my holidays with my family and my children and myself than I have done when I maybe was in my 20s, when I didn't have that much in terms of a spend on those sorts of things. So eating out, going away. I mean, I drive the car I want to drive. It's not my everyday car is a Range Rover. Yeah, it's a lovely Range Rover. But when I was in my late 20s and early 30s, I was driving a 911 Turbo. So I can't say that, I've always been wanted to drive a nice car. So that hasn't really changed for me. So yeah, apart from that, and people say to me, oh, well, why don't you go and do this? And why don't you buy a boat? And I think, I don't bloody want a boat. I don't want a boat. I don't even like bobbing around on a boat. It doesn't appeal to me. So it's funny because my mate's into boats. He's got a boat out in Mallorca, and he says to me, why don't you? And I say, no, I'm all right. I've got your boat if we want to go out on your boat. But yeah, so I'm not that bothered by luxury items in terms of having to own them myself. I'm not saying they haven't got value, because they have, and to some people, they mean everything, and I can sort of understand it. But I'm probably quite lucky in that respect, because I mean, I've got a little bit of a soft spot for vintage cars and motorbikes. They don't have to be worth millions, though. My garage is full up of old scooters, Lambrettas, Vespas. Got an old 1950s Porsche in there at the moment, and a 50s American car on the drive. I've got a little bit of a soft spot for that. It's not, they're not worth millions of pounds. They're just old, interesting items. They're rusty, actually, but I like them like that. I bought an old scooter off a couple that had gone on their It's from 1953. I'd gone around there and they'd gone on their honeymoon on it, and this thing was rusty in the corner, and they said, oh, we haven't touched it since 1962 when my husband fell off. I got this thing home, and it's just sat. I just love looking at it. Every now and again I'll go into the garage and I've got a picture of them on their honeymoon in Italy. They drove from Croydon to Italy on their honeymoon on a Vespa, and this old Vespa's sitting there. As I said, it's not worth a lot of money. It's probably worth $2,000 or $3,000, but that gives me a lot of pleasure. I know it sounds silly, but so I can sort of understand why people might want to own a Rolex, or a piece of jewellery or a piece of art, because I'm the same way about it. But it's not about the money for me. It doesn't have to be worth millions.
Do you know, so it's just something that dawned on me. So you've got 9 sites now, you're doing really well. But if I bought to you today helicopter, Picasso, or the Andy Warhol that sold for $195 million just recently today, or I don't know, a private jet, and you said these are all good deals, I can lend money on it. You haven't got an endless pot of money, so where does the money come from?
No, we haven't got an endless pot of money, but we've got financiers in place where we draw money from if we need to. We're quite fortunate because we've got money coming in almost on a daily basis. Loans get redeemed. And the loan book's very strong at the moment. But yeah, now and again, and historically, I can think of 4 or 5 times where we've had to call on third parties for funding. It does happen. Obviously, we can't facilitate those deals in a day. They take a bit longer, but we've got those people out there that can funnel money to us if we need to get something across the line quickly.
Good stuff. Where do you see yourself, James, in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, I like to think that we're going to carry on doing what we're doing. We're just about to open our new store just around the corner from the Bank of England, opposite Leadenhall Market on Gracechurch Street. So, that's a great location. We're going to grow the brand in the UK steadily over the next 2 or 3 years. We're in talks currently with individuals that are abroad that want to license the brand out there. I need to be careful about what I'm doing in that respect, but that's something that I could see happening in the future. But I mean, we want to keep it quite tight here in the UK over the next couple of years. It's not a brand. You can't have a Posh Pawn shop on every high street, but we're at 9 at the minute. If it got to sort of 20 or 25, I'd see that as where it should probably end up. And that's what I aim to do with it.
And any advice that you give any young entrepreneur getting into the pawn industry or just into business, generally speaking, James?
Oh God! Well, look, just follow your dreams and don't be put off, and don't be scared of making mistakes. Really, I don't know. It's as simple as that for me. I mean, just go out there. You got to be in it to win it, and don't let your fear of loss be stronger than your desire for gain, because then you won't do a deal.
One more question. So when I first got into business for myself, I was around about 24 years of age, sales company. Predominantly back then, and I'll say probably still now, it's full of mostly men, alpha male sort of type environment. There are some phenomenal women salespeople out there, which are great, and it's actually nice for the dynamics of sales enterprises to have a bit of a mix, but I still would say it was led by mostly men. So to keep everybody in check, come up with a bit of a mantra and a life kind of saying, and this is how it goes: be happy, never content. Now, I've got my own reason why I come up with that. I'm going to ask you, James, what does be happy, never content mean to Mr. Posh Pawn?
Well, you're putting me on the spot now, aren't you? Be happy, never content. What does that conjure up in my mind? Well, I think if you're content, you've almost sort of got to the end of where you wanted to get to. I'm not at the end of where I'm not content. I can tell you that for sure. I'm driven to do more, and I'm always sort of feeling that I could do more, and almost like I'm underachieving in a way. So I can't imagine being fully content in what I do in terms of my business life. We're talking about here, not personal. I can't imagine being content because there's always a new deal or a new angle or more money that can be made out of something, or there's always new things coming up. It's such a interesting environment, and to be out there amongst it. Obviously, when you get to a certain age, you're going to think, I can't carry on with this anymore. But I can't actually envisage a time where I would sit at home not doing a lot, to be honest with you. And I suppose if there was that time to come, then I would be content. Am I happy? I think I'm as happy as I could be, to be fair. I'm not always happy, but I can't imagine being much happier. But am I content? No, I'm probably not content.
Good stuff. James, where can people find you?
Well, we've got online. You can find us at prestigepawnbrokers.co.uk, or the online luxury store which sells all the goods, which is shopprestige.com. We're in Hatton Garden. We've got a store in Brighton, Manchester, Loughton.
And your own personal Instagram, I know you got it. Is it active?
Do you know what? I hadn't been on it for so long. We've actually just got back on it this 2 days ago. It is James Posh Pawn, and it's on Instagram, and I've actually just put a post up this morning. So
good.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Perfect. Well, look, thank you for your time. Great conversation. I'm really looking forward to getting this out there and listening to it back myself. I think there's a lot of good sound bites in there that will inspire, motivate and educate people. And I want to say to the audience, if you've enjoyed it, definitely go to his shop. Definitely follow his journey. Look out for his Instagram post because he swears that he's posting again. And always remember to be happy, never content. Thank you for subscribing and listening.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Cheers.